In 2007, The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford was released. Directed by Andrew Dominik, it was based on the 1983 historical novel of the same name by Ron Hansen, which was acclaimed for its accuracy. Hansen himself wrote about his process. "My rules are fairly simple. Honesty and fidelity throughout, meaning no hard facts, however inconvenient, may be dismissed, and no crucial scenes, however wished for, may be turned to ends that might be more pleasing to a contemporary audience. In other words, I do not budge from the truth as I know it." The film is remarkably faithful to Hansen's book. While some plot is excised, some scenes are reordered, and some characters are composited, as Hollywood adaptations go, it's about as close as it gets. Most of the dialogue is taken verbatim from the book.
As for me being a gunslinger, I just got this one Granddaddy Patterson Colt, and a barred belt to stick in him. But I also got an appetite for greater things.
And the film employs a voiceover narrator who speaks with dispassionate authority and is almost always reading words directly from the novel's pages.
Bob was sent away cordially the next day, with a goodbye from Jesse, but nothing from Z beyond what good manners demanded.
Given the apparent accuracy of the source material and the film's use of this narration, you might expect it to be a realistic docudrama, an attempt to cut through all the legends and present the truth about Jesse James and Robert Ford. Indeed, the film does have some naturalistic elements that undercut earlier mythic conceptions of the West, such as the point-blank shootout where almost every bullet misses. And yet, the film's style strays far from naturalism. The cinematography by Roger Deakins is vividly expressionistic, with its chiaroscuro lighting, lens distortion, and bold compositions. The soundtrack by Nick Cave and Warren Ellis starts with a gentle lullaby, placing us in a dreamlike reverie. The score will often overwhelm sequences, with its mournful strings and piano drowning out all diegetic sound. Characters, at times, seem to move in trance-like synchronicity with the music. The sound design is frequently either amplified or muffled unnaturally. Often to create a strange, almost ethereal effect.
Right on schedule, Buck!
All of this is to say that the film, quite self-consciously, is communicating to us that it is not meant to be read as a realistic depiction of historical events, a straightforward telling of the truth as we know it. The film is heightened, stylized, dreamlike, operatic. In its introduction of Jesse James, the film doesn't try to deconstruct the character in the manner of Robert Duvall's depiction decades prior. Rather than puncturing Jesse's myth, it inflates it.
Rooms seemed hotter when he was in them. Rains fell straighter. Clocks slowed. Sounds were amplified.
The camera glorifies Jesse. We see many iconic images, and he is the subject of almost all of them. He frequently appears in silhouette, turning him into a literal icon, the outline of an outlaw with all specifics erased. He is portrayed by Brad Pitt, one of the most famous movie stars of his generation, and also one of the least relatable. Rather than the everyman, he is often cast as a cool, detached character, a figure of both admiration and aspiration.
All the ways you wish you could be, that's me. I look like you want to look, I am smart, capable, and most importantly, I'm free in all the ways that you are not.
As the film's director Andrew Dominik has stated, he doesn't invite you to share his position. Brad Pitt is also a celebrity, a figure whose private life is as scrutinized and commodified as his work. Audiences watching him bring with them a set of preconceived notions and parasocial fantasies. He is famous for his attractiveness. often referred to as a sex symbol. In 2007, he was at the height of his fame, and he brings all of his star power and charisma to the role of Jesse James. The real Jesse supposedly had a high-pitched, raspy voice, but Pitt's is deep, steady, and even.
You have something to confess in exchange. You'd only be right. You'd spit it out now.
He commands attention and dominates every scene he's in. Other characters often regard him with fear, awe, and desire. This movie's version of Jesse James seems to be more than just a man, more than a historical figure. He is the embodiment of all the many tales told about him. He is the Jesse from all the films, books, and songs brought to life. A myth incarnate. While Jesse has this monumental reputation that precedes him, by contrast, Robert Ford is a nobody. In his first moments on screen, we see how little attention or regard other people pay him. He's on the outside looking in, desperate to be included, and resentfully wishing that he were the one at the center of attention. While Jesse is handsome, polished, well-dressed, and highly assured and deliberate in his mannerisms and vocal intonation, Ford is the opposite in almost every way. His clothes are tattered and worn, his gait awkward, his voice breaks.
I don't care!
He is not composed. Casey Affleck at this point didn't have nearly the same level of fame as Brad Pitt. Audiences were less familiar with him. He still existed very much in the shadow of his brother in the public imagination.
Who are you then?
Bob Ford?
Charlie's brother?
Affleck was in his 20s at this point, but does a remarkable job of playing Ford in his late teens, still far more a boy than a man. Sometimes he acts like a child, sitting cross-legged and playing with toys. The mismatch in age between actor and role produces an uncanny effect, adding all the more to Ford's awkwardness. Jesse James has long been Robert Ford's hero. We learn early on that he studied every book and every newspaper article he can find for scraps of information about Jesse, and merged them together in his head to construct an ideal. Someone he looks up to, someone he wants to be. However, this image of Jesse that Ford has within his head is depoliticized, scrubbed of historical context. Jesse's pro-Confederate politics are alluded to a few times in passing through dialogue,
President of the Confederacy would discern his wife's needs and satisfy them.
through voiceover,
He considered himself a Southern loyalist and guerrilla in a civil war that never ended.
even through song.
Hates the Yankee Nation and everything they do.
Ford, however, seems totally unaware and uncaring about the Southern cause. For Ford, all that matters is the romanticized version of Jesse that appears in dime novels, the Western hero who represents freedom and individuality, danger and excitement. If the version of Jesse we see in the introduction of the film is an archetype, an amalgam of every story told about the outlaw, Ford seems to stand in for every young boy that read those stories, the audience that both consumed and constructed Jesse's image. At the start of the film, he tries to join the gang and ingratiate himself with Frank and Jesse. As he approaches Frank James, we hear distant laughter from the gang in the background, which, while seemingly coincidental, feels like it is mocking Ford.
I was lying when I said I just happened down here. I've been looking for you, and I feel lousy. I didn't say so at the outset.
Every word he says is clearly scripted and rehearsed in advance.
And I was hoping if I ran into you, aside from those picket woods, I could show you how special I am.
You can imagine him practicing these interactions beforehand.
Let me be your sidekick tonight,
Sidekick?
so you can examine my grit and intelligence.
Later, Robert's brother Charlie will approach Frank with the same pitch, using some of the exact same language.
What I figured was if you and Jesse could gauge our courage and our daring, you might just make us your regular sidekicks.
Your courage and your daring. I about heard all I want to about sidekicks. Sound like your damn brother.
Further underlining how contrived and constructed these conversations are. Likewise, when Robert is first speaking with Jesse, he is clearly leading the conversation in directions that will allow him to recite the trivia he has stored in his head.
Am I too late to wish you a happy birthday?
He awkwardly attempts to appear spontaneous in his behavior, but his performance is transparent.
Oh. What's this? Oh, yeah.
It is clear that he's not really interacting with the actual men who stand before him, but the versions of them that exist in his head. Just as Ford has prepared and rehearsed his own dialogue, it is clear that he's prepared the responses that he'd like these men to give. He wants them to play their parts. Frank James finds this deeply discomforting.
I don't know what it is about you, but the more you talk, the more you give me the willies.
He resents having these expectations thrust upon him, and reacts with understandable anger. Yet Jesse seems both amused and fascinated by Ford. He seems to enjoy toying with him, upsetting his expectations, trying to break Ford out of his script.
You ever see that woman up in Pitt? Suck noodles up her nose. In Fayette?
No, I don't believe I have.
You never heard of her? Huh? You got canals up there you never dreamed of.
And so a kind of death dance begins between Jesse James and Robert Ford. The steps are all predetermined, and the ending is inevitable. The stilted, scripted nature of Ford's dialogue isn't just there to tell us about the character, it communicates the very nature of the film itself. All these characters' words and actions are scripted, predetermined, rehearsed and repeated, doomed to be enacted over and over again with no deviation. The characters are like actors on a stage, dreamers in an endlessly recurring dream, ghosts repeating the actions of the living. Early on, the voiceover casually tells us in passing what's going to happen to Jesse.
Alexander Franklin James would be in Baltimore when he would read of the assassination of Jesse James.
Even the title of the film itself, The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, is a spoiler. Before we even start watching the film, we already know the fate of these characters. The visual style only adds to this effect. Many sequences have cold lighting and muted colours that render them almost black and white, whilst others are bathed in a warm browny-orange glow that makes them appear sepia, much like 19th century photographs. Roger Deakins used adapted tilt-shift lenses to create a distorted vignette around the images they captured, in order to evoke the vintage feeling of early photographic portraits. The lenses became known as Deakinzers. Some reviewers compared the film's visual style to the work of Terrence Malick, which seems like a fairly superficial comparison, based largely on the fact that it features wheat fields filmed at dusk. To me, the film is far more reminiscent of Terence Davies' Distant Voices Still Lives, which feels like a series of faded photographs brought to life. This evocation of old photography brings to mind the legendary French film critic André Bazin's claim that at the root of all plastic arts, there is a desire to embalm the dead, to attempt to snatch a subject's appearance from the flow of time. Photography, he claimed, embalms time itself. He wrote about old photographs that, those grey or sepia shadows, phantom-like and almost indecipherable, are the disturbing presence of lives halted at a set moment in their duration. By capturing and preserving images of ourselves and the world around us, we attempt to transcend the limits of time and space and create a lasting legacy that will endure long after we are gone. However, from the moment an image of us is captured, it becomes something other to ourselves. Images have a habit of taking on lives of their own. In The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, the characters frequently are framed in beautifully composed wide shots, often standing almost static, as if they are arranged within a tableau vivant. A tableau vivant is typically a stage production in which actors stand motionless in living recreations of paintings. Again, this gives the sense that we aren't looking upon actual people, but pictorial representations of them, the fragments of life essence captured in the process of creating an image of someone, the persistence of the past in the present.